Okay, guys, so please make sure that your cameras are on. Please turn your cameras on. Okay, guys, thank you so much. So, I hope that your weekend was, you had a good weekend. That you enjoyed Carnival. And we're gonna continue. Okay, guys. So last week, if you remember, we were doing the writing section, right? We started with the first question of the writing section. But we said, how many questions do we have in the writing section? How many? 2, right? Great. So we have 2 different questions in the writing section. One of them was integrated, right? Which is the one we did last week, integrated question. And the other one is independent design. Now, do you guys remember the difference between integrated and independent questions? What is it? Micaela, do you remember?
Between integrate and independent is like independent, like the word says, is an article independent about another thing, about the listening, sorry.
An article about listening, you sure?
No, sorry, I'm confused.
You're getting confused, right? That is the integrated one, actually. What about the independent then? So we said this goes for both the writing and the speaking section, because in both the writing and in the speaking section, you have both integrated and independent questions. We said integrated is basically what Micaela is saying. Integrated means that you have to integrate your skills. Even though this is writing, you're not just going to be evaluated on your writing skills. You're going to be evaluated on your integrated skills. That means how you integrate listening skills and reading skills and then come up with a writing, right? That is integrated. So for the integrating writing, what you had to do was summarize a lecture in an article. So you had to read, you had to listen, and then write. And that was your final response, right? Now, independent is the opposite. Independent is mostly about your writing. It's less about the content of your writing and more about your writing skills itself. Now, in the independent, as the name says, it doesn't depend on anything. So your response doesn't depend on anything but the question. You don't have to summarize anything anymore. In the independent question, you will only write about yourself, about your ideas, your opinions, your thoughts, your experiences. Okay, that is the difference. So today we're gonna start then with the independent question, independent writing, okay? And we're gonna work on this today and tomorrow. So, and we have one more class. Like, no, we have this entire week. So this whole week we're gonna be reviewing the whole writing section. So let's start working on the independent question, okay? Now remember the writing rubrics, right? This is how they evaluate your response. Remember, we have 3 big categories. They look at 3 things in your response. The first one is topic development, right? Which basically means how coherent is what you write, how much sense it makes. If they are asking you about music and you write about food, it's not coherent, right? You're not answering the question. You're not fulfilling the task. How concise is your writing, right? So that's why we said it's not about making your writing longer, right? It's not about using longer phrases and longer words to have more, but instead it's about having conciseness in your writing. So you need to be writing or saying a lot, but in few words. So you don't want to try making your essay longer, right? That's not the goal. and about obviously how you manage your time, so how much you can write in a given time. Topic development was also about how you develop your ideas. So if you just say, I think that, I don't know, I think that we should all eat healthy food, right? That is your idea. But you don't need to just say something like that. You need to support and develop your responses. So if that is your opinion, then you need to tell me why. You need to give me reasons, examples, details, everything that supports what you're saying, right? That was topic development. Second was how you organize your essay. So this has to do with using connectors, right? Which is the test that you take. But this is the easiest part because if you follow the template, then usually you already have this, right? So you have to use different connectors, you have to structure your essay in paragraphs, and your ideas need to flow in a logical order, right? So if I start talking about, let's say, healthy food, and then I change completely the topic to something different, and then I come back to healthy food, then it isn't logical, right? The way that my ideas are flowing isn't really that natural. I'm forcing it a little bit. And of course, this is probably the most difficult one, and that is language use, right? We said two things, vocabulary and grammar. Vocabulary had to do with obviously showing the range of your vocabulary. So using somewhat fancy words and showing that you have the vocabulary of an advanced student and having an appropriate vocabulary, a good word choice. So you need to choose the correct words to the context, right? If you're talking about music, you're going to use the word audience to refer to the people who listen to music, right? You're not going to say the people who listen to music. You're going to say the audience, right? That is basically word choice. And obviously grammar, which means one, not making so many grammar mistakes, and two, showing that you have somewhat an extent grammar variety, that you have mastered different grammar structures, right? Any questions about this? This was really important to review as well. Do you guys have any questions about this before we start? Me plugging my computer. No questions? Okay, guys. So let's see. Okay, guys. So without further ado then, let's just start with what we were saying, the independent writing. And please, just don't forget to turn your camera off. Okay, guys. Now the independent writing works like this. They will basically give you a question. They will ask you a question, give you a prompt. It will appear on your screen. You read the question and that's it. That's all you're gonna do. You read the question and then right after you read it, you will have 30 minutes to write an essay answering that question, okay? Now these questions aren't tough questions. They're not gonna ask you something about like science. Let's say they're not gonna ask you something like about physics or biology. They will ask you questions on familiar topics, on things that everybody can answer. Basically, they will ask you questions on your opinion on a familiar topic. So what do you think about something? So things like education, lifestyle, so that means health, working out, work, technology, finance, and environment, those are the most common topics that you get. For instance, as for education, they could ask you something, usually it's something debatable, something that you can have different opinions on. So for example, for education, they can say, do you think that homeschooling should be legal, right? So do you think that it should be, parents should be allowed to homeschool their children? So that is something that you can have two different opinions, right? You can say, yes, I think that homeschooling is a good idea, or no, I think that children shouldn't be homeschooled. They should go to normal schools. So that is something that you can debate on. And basically that is an opinion, right? It's something subjective. Now, how many choices do you have? If I ask you that question, if I say, do you think or do you agree or disagree that homeschooling is a good idea for children? How many possible answers do you guys have? So, right, you can say, yes, I agree, or no, I disagree. Now, do you think that you can do something like saying, well, I don't know? Do you think that's a possible answer? Well, in the TOEFL test, no, you don't have in-between options. So you either say yes or you either say no. You have to choose one of the options. And even though you don't feel that like there's like one specific way, even though your actual opinion is that it depends on the student, you cannot say that in this essay. You have to take a side and it has to be really strong. So you totally agree or you totally disagree, but there's no place in between here, okay? Keep in mind that so far. Let's say, as for technology, this is very common as well. There are many debatable questions. Can you guys tell me a topic that would be really debatable as for technology? What question do you think we can expect?
Maybe the use of cell phones.
Okay, the use of cell phones, like if it's good or bad? Yes, okay, that's a really good question. So you can have a question like, do you agree or disagree that cell phones have a positive impact on young adults, right? So you have two options. You say, I agree that they have a positive impact, or I disagree. You just have those two options. You cannot go in between and say, well, I think that it has advantages and disadvantages. No, that's not the type of essay that you're supposed to do here. So those are basically the types of questions. All right, any questions about this so far? Okay. Now, these are the most common types of questions. The first one is the one that I was telling you before. Do you agree or disagree, right? In Spanish, this means, ¿estás de acuerdo o no, right? Do you agree or disagree with? And they give you a statement. For example, they can tell you, do you agree or disagree that online education is better than traditional education? Okay. Now, that is the most common type of question. You get one of those 65% of the time. Do you agree or disagree? Now, the only two possible answers to this is one, I completely agree, or two, I completely disagree. You don't have a place in between, as I was telling you. You cannot tell me, well, in some cases it's better, in others it's not, or I don't have a strong opinion, right? You have to take one of the sides. Is this okay so far? Now, the second most common type of question is this. Some people prefer this, others prefer that. Which option do you prefer? If you think about it, it's exactly the same. You get two options, you have to choose one. For example, you can have some students prefer to have online classes, and others prefer to learn in a traditional classroom. What do you prefer? Right? So it's exactly the same question. You have to choose between online education and traditional education. So your answers would be one, I prefer option one, pardon. And number two, I prefer option two. There's no way, there's no place in between. Okay, same thing here. Now, another type of question, and this isn't that common, honestly, is which of the following, and you get two or three options, and they ask you, do you think is better? Do you think is more important? Do you think is the best option? So for example, they can ask you, which of the following do you think is more important to, I don't know, to do while studying abroad? Option number one, learn the language. Option number two, meet people. Option number three, learn about the culture. right? In that case, you have three options. Now, the way that you're gonna answer is exactly the same. If you have three options, then you gotta choose one of them. You cannot go choosing two or the three of them. You have to choose one of the options, okay? Like, I think that learning the language is the most important thing. I think that meeting people is the most important thing. I think that learning about the culture is the most important thing. But you have to choose one. Okay, guys? Any questions about this so far? Okay, guys. Now, some tips that I can give you beforehand. We're going to start right now with an example. The first one is what I was telling you, and this is the most important tip. Have a strong position. So you gotta take one side, right? Always. Be completely strong in your argument. So I totally agree or I totally disagree. No way in between. Now, second, and this is another important tip. Remember, I told you the independent one isn't really about the content. You can say whatever you want. You can say, I think that it should be illegal to eat hamburgers. You can say that if you want, no problem. They won't evaluate your response based on what you say, based on your opinions. They are not judging you, okay? So it should be completely up to you what you say. You don't have to be honest. It doesn't have to make sense, and it doesn't have to be something, let's say, like the best thing, right? So if they ask you something like, "Do you think that hamburgers should be illegal?" You can completely have an essay saying that you don't think that they should be legal. Okay, so you don't have to be honest, and you can write basically whatever you want. It's more about how you write than what you write. Okay, that is really important here. Number 3 goes with number 1. You don't have to compare and contrast your options and be like, I think both have advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons. No, you just have to go with one. Another tip will be to always outline your essay first. Now, do you guys know what an outline is? Do you guys know what an outline is? So an outline is like a structure. What you're gonna do as soon as you get the question is outline your essay in a piece of paper. Remember that when you're taking the test, you are allowed to take notes throughout the entire test, throughout the 4 sections. So here, when you get the question, the first thing you're gonna do before you start typing is outline your essay. Okay, I'm gonna tell you exactly how to do this in a bit when we get to the example, but just know that you have to do this step, okay? That's it. Any questions so far about these first 4 tips? Okay. Now, one important thing is grammar matters a lot, especially in this one, okay? And I'm gonna give you some specific tips for this one and how to improve your grammar when we get to the practice, okay? But grammar is really important and punctuation is too. So even if you feel like you're really good at writing, we tend not to have not so much knowledge about grammar because we leave that aside. We practice a lot speaking and listening, and we think that, and honestly, that's the most important part of learning a language, practicing speaking and listening, because that's the way that you communicate mostly. But for the writing section specifically, you need to be really careful with grammar. Okay, so I'm gonna give you some tips on how to prepare for this part. Another tip, and I already said this before, in the writing section, your essays shouldn't be creative essays, So you shouldn't be worrying about having an interesting introduction and a fun conclusion and making it like appealing or attractive for the reader. Your goal here is just to demonstrate, that you know how to write, right? So it isn't about creativity. It isn't about having an interesting and fun and creative and different essay, but instead it's just about demonstrating your writing skills. Not creative writing, but academic writing. So don't focus too much in the intro and conclusion because they're not as important as the body of your response. Another thing, and you're probably gonna ask me this, how many words should I write, right? This is what most people ask. Now, when you're taking the test, the TOEFL will tell you you should be having around 250 to 300 words. But that is not a word limit or a word requirement. You can go over this, you can have fewer words. It's totally fine. Don't count the words, don't try to, feel like if you have more, you're gonna get a higher score. It's about quality, not quantity. So what you can do to make sure that you meet the requirement of having an essay is make sure that you have at least 4 paragraphs, and at least the body of your essay should have 5 lines long. So every paragraph should be 5 lines long. Okay, the body paragraphs. So that means 5 lines when you're typing on the computer where you take the test. Any questions about this so far? No? Are we okay? All right, guys. So that's it. Last one we already saw. No questions, really? Okay, guys. So let's just get to it. We're going to start with an example, and we will see. Okay, guys. So this is going to be the first sample we do. Could anyone please read the question?
Can I, teacher?
Yes.
Okay. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Sometimes it is better to be dishonest with people than to always tell them the truth. Use specific reasons and details to support your answer.
Okay, thank you so much. So the first thing you do when you read the question, first step is identify the options. A lot of people underestimate this step. They just read the question and start typing. And the first thing you need to do is make sure that you know what the options are and that you have them really established. So remember I told you, you're always going to have 2 or 3 options, but not more than that. These are closed questions, which means that there are not multiple ways to answer this question. There are just 2 or 3. Now, what are the options in this case? What options are they giving us? What is option 1?
Agree.
Be dishonest.
Exactly. Option 1 would be saying, I agree. So I agree that it's better to sometimes be dishonest. Right? That would be your first option. I agree that it's better to sometimes be dishonest with people than to always tell them the truth. Right? That is the first option. And what about the second option?
Always tell them the truth.
Exactly. So the second option would be, I disagree with this statement. I don't think that it's better to be dishonest. I think that it's better to always tell them the truth. Right? Those would be the 2 options that you have. Of course, you don't have to type this or you don't have to write it down, but you do have to, in your mind, identify the 2 options, okay? So that you know which options you have. Do you think there's a third option? No, right? It's I agree completely or I disagree completely. Now, after you have identified your options, of course, you need to choose one option. And you can always, since we're doing an outline first, if we don't feel that that is a good option, we're going to go for the other. Because remember, this isn't about what you actually think. So the way that you're going to choose the option is, what do you think is easier to write about? Do you think it's easier to justify that it's better to be dishonest? Or do you think it's easier to justify that it's better to always tell the truth? What do you feel would be easier for you to justify in your essay? Which option should we choose? What do you guys think? One or two? If you're thinking too much, because this should be really quick, what you can do is kind of do like a brainstorming of ideas, okay? I'm gonna tell you something. I'm getting ahead. In your essay, you always have to give two reasons, okay? So if you think, I agree that it's better to be dishonest, you need to give me two reasons why it's better to be dishonest. And if you're saying that you disagree, that it's better to tell the truth, same thing. You need to give me two reasons. Now, can we think of two reasons why it would be better to be dishonest sometimes? Can you guys give me one reason? What would be one reason?
Because sometimes the being honest can be say the truth could be hard to the other person.
Telling the truth could hurt somebody else's feelings, right? Telling the truth? Is that what you mean? Okay, so that is a really good thing, right? Telling the truth could hurt someone's feelings. No, maybe you disagree with this, right? Maybe you think, well, no, but at the end of the day, it's always better to tell the truth than to hear a lie, whatever. Everybody deserves the truth. Maybe you don't agree with this, but it would be a good reason. And remember that I told you it's not about having the best reason because there is no best reason here. It's just about finding a logical reason, something that makes sense. Okay, so even if you disagree with this, you can still write about it. Remember that you don't have to be completely honest about what you think, but you have to go with the easier option. What would be another reason to be dishonest sometimes?
Makes things easier.
Okay, it makes things easier. Why does it make things easier?
I don't know. I just thought about it.
Okay, but in what sense? Can you imagine a situation in which it makes things easier?
Not to complicate a situation to argue with the other person.
Okay, all right. Yes, it avoids like arguments. That's a good reason as well. Now, the reason why I'm asking you this and why you have to ask yourself too, you have to think of situations too. Like think of a situation where you would tell the truth to somebody and hurt their feelings. For example, maybe, I don't know, maybe if somebody uh, is trying on a dress and you don't think it really suits that person, the dress that she's trying. Then, and if she asks you, like, do you think I look okay? And if you tell them, I don't think it suits you well, then maybe you're gonna hurt their feelings, right? So that would be maybe a situation in which telling the truth could hurt somebody else's feelings. And you also have to think of a situation where it would make things easier. If you can think of a situation and it is different than the previous one, then it's okay. You can write about this. But if the situation that you're thinking of is kind of the same, then you should be considering another reason. Why? Because, and this happens a lot with students, one very big mistake they make is they are redundant. So if, let's say, in the first one I say, it could hurt somebody's feelings, and the second one I say, it makes me feel bad, then if you think about it, it will make me feel bad because I'm hurting somebody. So at the end of the day, it's kind of the same reason that I'm using. And if I think of a situation, it will be the same situation. So if I write about, I mean, the two reasons that I have need to be completely different than each other in completely different contexts, okay? And that is the only way that you're gonna avoid being redundant. Because if at the end of the day, you end up writing about the same, then that will be a big problem, okay? So try to always make sure that they are different from each other. Now let's think about option number 2. What would be one reason why it's better to always tell the truth?
because people always expect someone to be honest.
Okay, yes. People always expect honesty, right? Someone to be honest. And yes, maybe you can say that everyone deserves to know the truth. What about another reason? Can we think of one more?
So do you don't feel guilty with yourself?
Okay, I like that. You don't feel guilty. I really like that because if you think about it, the two reasons are different from each other, right? One is about the people that you're lying to, so they don't deserve that, they expect you to be honest. And second is about yourself, right? So lying will make other people, will affect other people in yourself. So we're seeing it from two different perspectives, right? It's damaging for other people and it's damaging to yourself as well. And we can elaborate on those, they are different. We can think of different approaches for them. Maybe we could do the same for the first. So that is what you have to analyze. And also you have to consider, right now this is the outline, by the way. You don't have to do the outline for the two options. Right now we're just doing it to compare, but you don't have to. If you already chose your option, then you just do the outline for the one you chose. Right now we're doing both because I want you guys to, you could do it in your mind, right? But I want you to look at it right now. So what was I saying? Another thing, you need to know that for each reason you have, this is reason one, this is reason two. Aside from the reason, they say use specific reasons and details, right? These details are gonna be examples, basically. So you need to be able to demonstrate these reasons that you're giving with examples. So that is what I asked you to think of specific situations, right? In which you would feel guilty, in which things will be easier. So you will have to give examples as well. So considering that they have to be different, that you have to support them with examples and details, which one should we choose? Which one do you think is going to be better for us to write? Option one or option two? What do you guys think? One or two? Oh, nice. We can write about both, so just pick one.
The second.
Okay. So let's go with the second. All right, and then we have already decided. We're gonna say that we disagree and that it's always better to tell the truth, no matter what. That's what we're gonna do. Now, this that we have right here, this is the outline. So as you can see, it's really short, it's a few words, and this should be written on your paper. Okay, so you just have to do an outline of what your option is gonna be, what your opinion is gonna be, what opinion you're gonna justify, and the two reasons you will give. And we said, right, you're gonna do this so that you know that you're going with the right option and having the right reasons. Any questions so far about the outline? No? Okay, guys. So then let's go right off to the essay, to writing the essay. Now, the first thing I wanna say, and this is the same for writing number one, remember the first thing, your first goal is not to, is not to have a perfect thing, all right, a perfect essay. And that is usually the mistake most people make. Your goal here is to have an essay, first of all, because if you don't have an essay, if you just have one paragraph, even if that paragraph is perfect, you won't have a good score. So your first goal is to have the basic things you need for an essay. So in the beginning, during the first 20 minutes, you should just type and type and type whatever comes to your mind, right? Even if you're making grammar mistakes, even if you're not using the best words you could, even if you are not being so, like, you're not expressing your ideas in the way that you would want to, you just should type and type. And at the end, you're gonna go back and check and improve your essay. Only at the end, right? But the first thing is to have your essay. Instead, if you focus too much on having a perfect introduction, you're just gonna have an intro and it will be perfect, but that's it. And that is not an essay, right? So let's do that. First thing, remember we said we will need 4 paragraphs. So these are the 4 paragraphs. This is paragraph 1, paragraph 2, 3, and 4. Remember I told you we have an introduction and a conclusion. In this case, you will need a conclusion. So the first paragraph is the intro, the final one is the conclusion. And these other 2 paragraphs, we're gonna call them the body paragraphs because it is the body of your essay. This is gonna be body paragraph number 1. And in body paragraph number 1, you will basically talk about your first reason. And then you have body paragraph number 2, where you will talk about your second reason. All right? Any questions so far about that structure? Introduction, body, and conclusion. 2 reasons, 2 examples. Any questions? All right. Let's start in the introduction. What you're going to do here in the introduction is have 3 sentences. Let's do it here. In your introduction, and by the way, this is a template, right? This is the template. Remember what was a template? What is a template? Guys, anybody knows what a template is?
A structure that could help us.
So it's like a structure, something that will help you know what to write. You don't have to follow it entirely. You can change a few words, you can change a few transition words, that's fine. But the most important thing is the structure, right? Where I tell you, you should have a transition word here, you should have one. So you can say to start, or you can say first, no problem. But you should have a transition word in there. Where I tell you here, you should use an example, you should have an example. You can have a different transition. Instead of saying my personal experience, you can say, I have a good example for this. No problem. But you should have an example, right? So the most important part about the template is not really the words, although they are a good option. You know, if you don't really know what to say, they're a great option. But the most important part is always the structure of the template. Okay? Now, in the introduction, the first sentence is gonna be about the topic in general. So this first sentence is just gonna be giving the reader some context. Context as for the topic, all right? This first sentence, we're gonna paint it in yellow, and it's gonna be basically this one here. We'll write this in a bit. All right. Now the second sentence you have in your introduction should be your opinion. Your opinion, remember, is not anything but the answer to the question. And you should answer the question as directly as you can. So it should be really direct. Nobody should have any doubts about or any questions about what your opinion is. Okay? And the third sentence is a transition. Now this is just like something that you're gonna memorize. No problem there. Okay, I'm gonna paint them in colors so that you can know which one is which. All right, so I'm highlighting them. Yeah. Okay, guys. So how do we start? In the first sentence, we said that we have to talk about the topic in general, right? Now, when I say the topic in general, that means that you shouldn't include any opinions. It has to be completely objective, right? You don't have to go for one opinion in the first sentence. So in this question, guys, in your essay in general, what would you think the topic is? So what is the main topic of this essay or the question? What is this about?
About the honest?
Exactly, about honesty, right? So before we get to if it's better to be honest or not, the main topic is honesty, right? If I tell you, do you think that it's better to study alone or with a group? The topic would just be studying, right? Education. That would be the topic. I'm not saying studying alone or studying in a group. If I tell you, do you think it's better to stay in a company or to change companies from time to time? The topic would just be work life. It wouldn't be working in a company or in more companies. So you have to go for the broad thing. Now, in this case, the topic is just honesty. We can even go broader than this. We can talk about values, right, as the topic. That's fine as well. Or we can talk about morals, or we can talk about integrity, I don't know. But the topic itself is honesty, right? So in your first sentence, you have to talk about the topic in general. So you're just gonna talk about honesty or values if you want, but you don't have to give your opinion yet. So you shouldn't tell me that anything about like being honest or not being honest, okay? So this is a good way to do it. You can say most people would agree that whatever is of paramount importance for that's option. So basically this means la mayoría de las personas estarían de acuerdo que algo es muy importante y puedes decir para tal cosa. Right? So you just have to complete this. It's a good way to start. So for example, we could say something general. I'm gonna give you some examples. About honesty, I could say most people would agree that values are of paramount importance for the development of a human being, right? Or values or honesty has been of paramount importance throughout all history, right? So something like that, something general about honesty. And the most common thing to do is just say honesty is of paramount importance. So you're saying this topic is really important to debate, okay? So what can we say? Any ideas? What do we do here? How can we complete this sentence? Maybe Micaela, what would you do? What would you write?
Most people will agree that be honest or tell the truth.
Okay. Tell the truth is of paramount importance. Yes. Do you want to add for something or just like that?
Mm. Without for.
Okay. You can also use in, right? You could say most people would agree that, or you're gonna see something here, is of paramount importance when it comes to relationships, for example, you could say, right? So when it comes to means cuando se trata de, right? So you can say most people would agree that this is important when it comes to, that's a good option as well, we're gonna add it. When it comes to, and whatever you could say, or when it comes to raising a children, or when it comes to defining one's values, many things you could say. Okay, let's just say when it comes to relationships. All right. Now, one grammar tip, and this is really important, and it's actually in one of the things that I was gonna say. One grammar point that you guys should review that I've seen many students struggle with is gerunds. Okay? Now, gerunds are basically those verbs that end in ing that are not really verbs, that are used as the subject of a sentence. So when I talk about an action, and that is the main point in my sentence, for example, if I want to say, Decir la verdad es muy importante. En español digo así, ¿verdad? Decir la verdad es muy importante. La palabra decir está en infinitivo, decir. En inglés, si lo traduzco literalmente, sería to tell the truth is very important, right? Or tell the truth is very important. But in English, when I'm talking about an action, porque en esa oración, decir la verdad es importante, estoy hablando de la acción de decir la verdad. Entonces, cuando hablo de una acción en inglés, tengo que usar un gerund. So instead of saying tell the truth, I have to say telling the truth. Is important. Okay? So that is a really important grammar point. You can look it up because you're going to use it a lot. Okay, so here we're going to say telling the truth is of paramount importance when it comes to relationships. Okay? Any questions about this so far? No? All right. So that is our first sentence. That was our first sentence only about honesty. The one in yellow. Now the second sentence we said, it should be your opinion. So you should be answering the question they asked. And it should be very direct. Now that is another mistake that students make. They try to use fancy words in here. They try to paraphrase too much the opinion and they end up like losing it. And it doesn't make sense anymore. But when the reader is reading your introduction, they should already know what your opinion and what your answer is. So this part is the most important. You should be very direct and use simple words here, okay? If you think about it, this is kind of like a little bit complicated, right? I'm trying to make it a little bit fancy and whatever. But in this one, it should be easy and it should be simple because that is the most important part of your introduction and maybe of your entire essay, okay? We're gonna answer the question. We said that our opinion was that we disagree, right? We think that it's better to always tell the truth instead of being dishonest sometimes. Now, what you have to do here in the second sentence is say that. You can use the same words or you can paraphrase a few of them if you want, so use synonyms, but it should be really understandable. So how can we say it? One way to be would be, personally, I am convinced that it is always better to tell the truth, right? That's it. Or you can say, personally, I'm convinced that it is better to always tell the truth. So I'm using the same words, and that's an acceptable way of doing it. Do you want to go with that, or do you think that we can paraphrase and say something different, or use different words to say the same? What do you think we can do? Any ideas? You can look for synonyms, right? Instead of saying it is always better to tell the truth, you can say it is always better to be honest, or it is always better to be straightforward. You can use synonyms if you want, but right now let's just go with the same, okay? So that we don't get lost in there. So I'm gonna say, personally, I am convinced that, and here my opinion. So it is always better to tell the truth. That's it, right? Maybe we can add no matter the circumstance. Right, so we're adding something to like reinforce the idea, sin importar la ocasión. Right? Any questions about this second sentence? No? Is it okay so far? Okay. And finally, we have the transition, which is always going to be the same. You're going to say, I hold this opinion for 2 reasons, which shall be addressed in the following paragraphs. Okay, basically this means, pienso de esta manera, tengo esta opinión por 2 razones que las voy a tratar en los siguientes párrafos. It's something that you can basically copy and paste, or you can change a few things if you want, but you need to have this transition. Now, another important thing, and this is the same as in the previous essay, Remember, in the introduction, please don't summarize the essay. So if you think about it, in the introduction, I'm not talking about my reasons yet. I'm not saying anything about not feeling guilty or like people expecting the truth, right? I'm not saying anything about the reasons. I'm just acknowledging that I have two reasons. It's better not to summarize the reasons because you avoid being redundant, you avoid repeating words, and you save time. All right, so there's no reason why you would summarize the reasons. Is that okay so far? Any questions about that? I'm gonna paste it here. No questions? Okay, guys. So that's basically it. That is the introduction, all right? As for the body paragraphs, both of them are gonna be practically the same. Remember we said how many lines should we have in the body paragraphs? How many lines? We should be having in the body paragraphs at least 5 lines, right? And that is gonna be a complete essay, not a good essay. So in the body paragraphs, what we're gonna do is first line or first sentence, sorry, is gonna be reason number 1. So you're just gonna say what reason number 1 is. And again, it has to be very direct, same as your opinion. It should be really direct. So you're not gonna mix it up there. Now, second sentence is gonna be explaining reason number 1. So here you're gonna add one more thing to explain a little bit more reason number 1. It could be why. So if you're gonna say, to start, when you tell the truth, you don't feel guilty. You're gonna tell me why. So why don't you feel guilty? Or you're gonna tell me how. So how don't you feel guilty? Or when, or where, right? In which situations you don't feel guilty, you could say. So you're basically just gonna explain a little bit more reason number 1 in one more sentence. Okay, that is gonna be sentence number 2 that goes here. Finally, reason number 3, sentence number 3 is gonna be the example. So this doesn't necessarily have to be one sentence, it could be 1 or 2. The example should always be longer than the reason. Now, in the example, I'm gonna give you a tip. And we're gonna do this probably tomorrow, I don't think we have time. But you have different options for the examples. You have the option of giving a personal experience, right? And saying, for example, and talk about yourself and be like, there was this time when I lied to my mom about this, or I lied to my sister about this. And I'm gonna explain, right, what happened. So this was the context and I told her this and whatever. And afterwards, I felt really guilty and I felt awful. And that's why I don't feel like lying is a good option, no matter what happens, right? So in that case, I'm using a personal experience as an example. Now, that is a really good option, especially for advanced students. Okay, so for those of you who are already advanced students and who are comfortable with using different tenses, that is the best option. Because if you think about it, when I'm giving the example, I'm saying, when I was 15 years old, I lied to my sister about, I don't know, this. I felt guilty, right? You're using the past tense. You're talking about one specific experience, so you're gonna use the past tense. And that gives you points for grammar. You know, that makes, that is kind of forcing you to show that you know how to use more than just one tense. But if you're not comfortable with using the past tense or other tenses, then it's better if you avoid using this. And instead of giving a personal experience, you talk about this in general, right? And you say, so for example, if you lie to your boss about this, you may feel guilty after and you're gonna be convinced and whatever. So I'm giving a general example. I'm not talking about about a single experience, and I don't have the need of using other tenses, right? And another way that you can do this is just like give a fact and be like, in fact, I read a study that says that, I don't know, people who tell the truth are more likely to be happy. So you can make it up if you want. Okay, you have different options for examples, for details. We're gonna talk about this more tomorrow, and we're gonna actually write it. But do you guys have any questions so far? I think it's time already. Any questions about what we've done, which is basically just the introduction, right? I mean, the whole process of deciding and outlining, and then the intro. Any questions about this, what we've done today? No questions, really? No comments? Nothing to say? Okay, guys. And that'll be it for today's class. Tomorrow we'll continue writing our essay. We'll continue like explaining how to do it. It's not gonna take that much time, right? Today we wasted a lot of time, or we spent a lot of time in the introduction. But tomorrow we're gonna go fast. Okay, so that on Tuesday we can continue practice. Now, if you don't have questions, please don't forget today's daily survey. I already started it, so it should be on your screens. Please, if you don't mind filling that out for me before you leave. Okay, guys. Thank you so much then. I will be seeing you tomorrow. Have a good night.
Bye, teacher.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye, guys.